Even when the snow stops falling, evil still hides behind the badge. She was a decorated officer, loyal and fearless, until the system she trusted turned its gun on her. Framed, hunted, and left for dead, Emily Carter had no one left, except a wounded German shepherd who once took a bullet for her. And just when hope froze in the Alaskan winter, a stranger appeared. A retired Navy SEAL with scars deeper than the snow itself. That night, their paths crossed in blood and faith. What they uncovered would expose the rot within the city's very soul. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, please subscribe for more. Anchorage was wrapped in silence beneath a curtain of falling snow, the kind that softened every sound, yet made every breath sting with its icy edge. Streetlights cast halos on the white drifts, as if the city itself were glowing faintly from within. Beneath those lights stretched the winter market, rows of wooden stalls strung with fairy lights, selling steaming cider, smoked salmon, and carved antler crafts. The air smelled of pine resin, frost, and roasted coffee. Beneath that peaceful surface, danger waited. Officer Emily Carter moved through the crowd with trained precision, her breath steady, her hand close to her sidearm. She was 32, tall and athletic, with sharp cheekbones and a determined mouth that rarely softened. Her brown hair was tied in a no-nonsense bun beneath a navy beanie, and her dark blue police jacket was dusted with flakes that melted slowly against the warmth of her skin. Years in the Anchorage Police K-9 unit had made her calm under pressure, but this time something felt wrong. Her instincts, those same ones honed by loss and long nights on the street, were screaming. At her side trotted Rex, her German shepherd, a 6-year-old with a thick tan coat darkening to black along his back and ears. His eyes, deep amber, scanned the crowd with a soldier's vigilance. Rex had been with Emily since her rookie years, trained to detect narcotics, track suspects, and most importantly, protect her life. He was disciplined, but he carried the same quiet sadness his handler did, the kind that comes from seeing too much of the world's cruelty and not being able to stop it all. Emily's radio crackled. Unit 12, suspect moving toward 4th and G Street, gray hoodie, backpack, male, mid-20s. She spotted him. Average height, wiry, jittery, his movements too fast, too anxious. She followed, weaving through a crowd of bundled shoppers. The sound of a street musician's violin was swallowed by the rising wind. The man darted past a stand of smoked fish, scattering gulls, and disappeared into a narrow alley behind a bakery. Emily's voice was clear, authoritative. "Anchorage Police, stop!" No response, only the muffled clang of a trash can toppling over. Her heart began to hammer. Something about the alley felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. The hairs on the back of her neck lifted. She gave a silent signal. "Rex, check." The dog moved forward, low and precise, muscles rippling under his fur. Then it happened. The silence exploded. Muffled gunfire cracked the air, suppressed shots, professional and deadly. The first bullet struck brick inches from Emily's shoulder. She dropped behind a metal bin, adrenaline surging, fumbling for her radio. "Officer down! Ambush!" she shouted, but static answered her. Rex barked sharply, once, then lunged. She saw it as if in slow motion, the blur of tan and black fur colliding with a man in dark winter gear emerging from the shadows. The gun fired again. Rex took, the impact in his chest, and still kept moving, knocking the gunman to the ground. The other shooter appeared at the far end of the alley, weapon raised. Emily returned fire, grazing his shoulder. But there were too many. the cold air filled with smoke and echoes. Her hand slipped on melting snow as she dragged herself toward her partner. "Rex, stay with me," she gasped. The dog's breathing was ragged, a wet rattle. Blood spread across the snow like spilled ink. Her vision blurred. Somewhere in the chaos, she heard the sound of running feet. Fast, heavy, purposeful. Out of the haze came a man. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders wrapped in a dark, tactical jacket and jeans that had seen better days. A trimmed beard shadowed his jaw, and a faint scar crossed the bridge of his nose. His gray eyes were sharp, analytical, the kind that measured distance and threat in a single glance. Jake Lawson had the quiet presence of someone who'd lived in the rhythm of gunfire and silence. A Navy SEAL once, though no insignia marked him now. Years of deployments had carved both strength and fatigue into his face, leaving behind a calm that bordered on eerie. He didn't waste time asking questions. He moved to Emily, crouching low beside her, assessing the scene with clinical speed. "You're hit?" She shook her head, breath clouding. "No, my dog. He's bleeding out." Jake's eyes flicked to Rex. One glance told him the wounds were bad, chest and shoulder shredded by a burst of automatic fire. "Hold pressure," he said, already reaching into his ankle holster. He pulled out a vacuum-sealed trauma kit, military grade, compact, and worn. His gloved hands moved with terrifying precision, tearing open packets, pressing gauze deep into the wounds while Rex whimpered in pain. "Talk to him," Jake ordered, voice steady as stone. Emily obeyed through tears. "It's okay, boy. You did good. You're a hero, Rex." Her voice broke, and the dog's eyes flickered with recognition. Trust, pain, loyalty, all tangled together. The bleeding slowed, a dark ooze against the snow. Jake's fingers worked relentlessly, his face unreadable. He'd done this before. Too many times, for too many fallen brothers. But saving this dog, watching this woman's trembling hands hold on to hope, it woke something old in him, something he thought he'd buried in the desert years ago. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The attackers were gone, melted into the city. Jake looked at Emily, pale, exhausted, but still holding her partner's head. "He's stable for now," he said quietly. "But you need to get him to a vet. Fast." Her lips parted, gratitude and confusion warring in her eyes. "Who are you?" Jake zipped the kit shut, his gaze sweeping the alley for threats. "Just someone who's bad at minding his own business." He stood, snowflakes catching in his beard, and for a heartbeat the world fell still. The gray sky hung heavy above them, the alleyway silent except for the faint, stubborn rhythm of Rex's breathing. Emily watched as Jake disappeared into the blur of falling snow, his figure fading like a ghost returning to the storm. When the ambulance arrived minutes later, she was still holding Rex's paw, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. The snow had not stopped falling since the shooting. Anchorage looked like a watercolor painted only in whites and grays, its streets muffled under inches of silence. The city slept uneasily, unaware that one small veterinary clinic on the edge of downtown was fighting for a single heartbeat to continue. Inside, harsh fluorescent light turned the air sterile and cold. The metallic scent of disinfectant clashed with the earthy smell of wet fur and blood. Officer Emily Carter sat hunched on a metal bench outside the operating room, her uniform jacket still streaked with dried crimson. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, her cheeks pale and hollow. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. Adrenaline had burned away, leaving behind only dread and guilt. She could still see it, the moment Rex leapt into gunfire, the way his body crumpled but kept moving, his eyes locked on hers with the unspoken command to live. The surgical doors swung open. A woman stepped out, pulling off her gloves with the practiced exhaustion of someone who had seen too many close calls. Dr. Lillian Monroe was in her early 40s, a sturdy figure with tired hazel eyes and streaks of gray in her dark hair. Once a field veterinarian for rescue missions in Denali, she now ran this modest clinic for police and military animals. Her voice was calm but carried the gravity of bad news. "He's alive," she said, and Emily's heart lurched. "But the shoulder joint is shattered. I repaired what I could, but nerve damage is severe. He'll walk again, but he won't return to duty." Emily exhaled, the sound half relief, half heartbreak. "He's retired," she whispered. Dr. Monroe nodded gently. "Give him time. Dogs like Rex, they don't understand the word retirement. They only know purpose." Emily forced a weak smile, but inside she was unraveling. Purpose was all she'd ever had, too. Without Rex, the job felt hollow. Without the badge, she wasn't sure who she'd be. The clinic door opened, letting in a gust of icy air and a new presence that chilled the room more than the wind. Detective Mason Rourke entered, her superior officer, though the word superior had always sounded ironic in his case. Rourke was in his late 40s, tall, with a polished look that belonged more in a courtroom than a crime scene. His dark hair was combed to precision, his clean-shaven face angular and handsome in a calculated way. But his eyes, cold, sharp, the color of slate, spoke of someone who valued control above truth. "Officer Carter," he said, removing his gloves, voice smooth as oil over ice. "Quite a mess you've made." Emily rose to attention, wincing as her injured leg reminded her of the fight. "Sir, it was an ambush. There were at least 3. He raised a hand, silencing her. "You disobeyed protocol. You pursued a suspect alone into a restricted zone without backup. Your partner is out of commission. 1 suspect dead, 2 escaped. Tell me why I shouldn't suspend you right now." Anger flared in her chest. "Because I followed procedure until the situation turned. The man I was chasing wasn't a petty thief. He was bait. They had suppressed weapons, professional tactics. Someone set us up." Rourke's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, an irritation quickly buried. "You're tired, Carter. Shock does strange things to memory. File your report, then take 2 weeks off." "That's not good enough. It's not a discussion." His tone snapped like a whip, final and cruel. Emily's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. Rourke turned to Dr. Monroe, pretending courtesy. "Doctor, please keep me updated on the animal's condition. The department appreciates your work." When he left, the room seemed to breathe again. Emily stared after him, her mind replaying his words, the lack of surprise in his tone, the way he'd brushed off the ambush. Something about it gnawed at her. From the hallway's far end, a quiet voice spoke. "He's too calm for a man who just lost officers to gunfire." Emily turned. Jake Lawson leaned against the wall, hands in his jacket pockets, snow melting on his shoulders. He looked different in the bright clinic light. Less ghost, more man. His eyes were steady, but there was a flicker of weariness behind them. A soldier's perpetual readiness to walk away before getting attached. "You followed me?" Emily asked, half accusing, half grateful. "I don't like loose ends," he said simply. "And you looked like one." She tried to smile, but it faltered. "Rex is alive, but they've ended his service." Jake stepped closer, glancing through the glass door at the motionless form on the table inside. "He's a fighter. He'll keep trying even when he shouldn't." Dogs like that, they don't understand quitting. She studied him. You've seen a lot of that, haven't you? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. I've buried brothers who wouldn't quit. I've also buried the ones who did. There's no right choice in that kind of life. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, snow tapped against the windows like soft knuckles. Emily could feel her heartbeat slowing, grounding her. I don't know who those men were, she said. But someone planned this. My radio died the moment it started. The alley was too perfect. It felt staged. Jake's gaze hardened. Then your detective knows more than he's saying. She frowned. You think Rourke's involved? I think men like him make sure they're never near the trigger, but always near the smoke. Emily gave a short, bitter laugh. That's not proof. He shrugged. No, but it's reason enough to stay alive. Before she could ask more, Jake reached into his coat and pulled out something small. A burner phone, black and thin, no markings. He pressed it into her hand. Keep this. When you realize what's really happening, call me. But don't use your department line. You're already being watched. Her pulse quickened. Why are you helping me? He gave her that half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Because people who tell the truth don't last long in systems built on lies. And I'm tired of watching the good ones die. He stepped back, nodded once, and walked out into the storm. Emily watched him vanish into the snow, his figure swallowed by the night. Inside the surgical room, Rex stirred weakly, letting out a soft whine. Emily placed her palm against the glass, whispering, I'm still here, boy. We both are. But deep down, she knew something in her life had already shifted. The kind of change that never melts away, even when the snow does. 2 days passed, each hour weighed down by the relentless whisper of snow against glass. Anchorage had become a blur of white and gray, the streets nearly deserted, the cold biting deeper than guilt. Inside her small apartment on Fifth Avenue, Emily Carter sat at her kitchen table, the glow from her laptop turning her face pale and ghost-like. The screen displayed the internal report from the department, a document that should have been her salvation, but instead, it condemned her. It accused her of assisting a trafficking ring, falsifying evidence, and compromising an ongoing investigation. The words bled into each other, every line a betrayal. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled, eyes burning. Each paragraph erased her reputation, 6 years of service reduced to a single lie. She leaned back, pressing her palms over her eyes, trying to steady her breath. The apartment felt smaller than ever. The only sound came from Rex, lying by the heater, his chest rising and falling in slow, uneven rhythms. His bandaged shoulder was still raw, but he lifted his head whenever she stirred, eyes full of trust she no longer believed she deserved. They're trying to bury us, boy, she whispered, and I don't even know why. The power flickered once, twice, before settling into a dim, trembling light. Emily reached into her drawer, pulling out the small black burner phone Jake had given her. She hesitated for a long second, staring at the blank screen. Finally, she pressed the single contact saved there. He answered on the first ring. You finally believe me, Jake said, his voice calm, gravel-edged, like a man used to being proved right too late. They framed me, she said, her voice breaking. The report, it says I was working with them. Rourke signed off on it himself. I know, Jake interrupted gently. You need to get out of your apartment. Right now. Her pulse spiked. What? Why? Because when they rewrite the story, they erase the witnesses next. Within minutes, she and Rex were out the door. The night wind cut through her coat like knives. Anchorage's harbor glowed faintly in the distance, lights blurred by falling snow. She followed Jake's instructions, driving through empty streets until the signs grew sparse and the road turned into a narrow path leading to the Nick Arm Docks, an old shipping pier half swallowed by ice and fog. He was already there, standing near the edge, his truck parked a few yards away. Jake Lawson looked carved from the cold. Tall, silent, his face half lit by the dim harbor light. He wore a dark green field jacket, worn boots, and a knit cap that couldn't hide the hardened lines of his jaw. The snow didn't seem to touch him. It melted before it dared. When Emily stepped out, he gave a brief nod. "You shouldn't have waited this long." "I thought I could fix it," she said, her breath fogging in the air. "I thought the truth mattered." Jake almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It used to. Now it's just a weapon." He motioned her closer, pulling a folded map from his coat. It was marked with red ink, routes, dates, shipping numbers. "I was investigating a man named Silas years ago," he said. "An invisible operator. No face, no footprint, but every black market pipeline in the Northwest ties back to him. Drugs, weapons, people. 3 years ago, I lost a teammate chasing one of his cargo routes through Anchorage. Now your ambush reads like his signature." Emily studied the map. "You think Rourke's working for him?" "I think Rourke's protecting him," Jake said. "Cops like Rourke don't pull triggers. They open doors." The wind picked up, blowing snow into their faces. Rex let out a low growl, his ears twitching. Jake turned sharply toward the sound. Across the street, through the white blur, a black SUV idled near the harbor fence, headlights off, engine steaming faintly. "They found you faster than I thought," Jake muttered. Emily tensed. "Who are they?" "Doesn't matter," Jake said, his tone changing, controlled, command-like. "Move!" They ran, boots crunching over the frozen pier. Rex limped but kept pace, his body pressing close to Emily's leg. The SUV's engine roared to life, headlights flaring through the storm. Jake reached his truck and yanked open the passenger door. "Get in!" As the vehicle fishtailed across the icy lot, gunfire cracked behind them, muted by snow but sharp enough to shatter the night. Bullets hit the guardrail, sparking brief flashes of orange in the white dark. Jake gritted his teeth, steering with one hand, the other reaching for the Glock holstered at his hip. His voice was low, steady, the voice of a man who'd fought too many ghosts. "You're not going home again, Carter. From this point on, they'll paint you as the villain." "Then what's next?" she asked, gripping the dashboard as the truck skidded onto the forest road leading north. He gave a humorless chuckle. "Next, we disappear." The drive took them through endless woods, pines heavy with snow, branches arching like old cathedral ceilings. After an hour, Jake turned down an unmarked path, barely wide enough for the truck. Finally, a cabin appeared, its roof buried beneath ice, smoke faintly rising from a chimney. The place was quiet, remote, the kind of silence that could hide both safety and death. "This is it," Jake said, cutting the engine. "My old team used it as a recovery post years ago. No signal, no cameras, no trail. You're safe here." Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and old memories. A single lamp cast a soft amber glow over a table scattered with tools, maps, and a framed photo of Jake with 4 other men in uniform, their faces young, alive, unaware. Emily picked it up. Your team? He nodded, eyes fixed on the fire. We called ourselves Ghost Unit. Half of them didn't make it back. Silas's men took one. The others, well, the mission ended the way they always do, buried in someone else's file. For a long time they said nothing. Outside, the snow thickened, swallowing the forest in silence. Emily looked down at Rex, who had finally settled near the fire, his breathing calm. Jake, she said quietly, if Silas is behind this, what does he want with me? Jake looked up, his expression dark. He doesn't want you, Emily. He wants your silence. At that, the cabin went still again, the fire popping softly, the storm whispering against the windows. And for the first time, Emily understood. This wasn't about a mistake or a cover-up. It was a hunt, and she was the prey. The storm had turned vicious by nightfall. Wind clawed at the cabin's wooden walls, howling through the pine trees like a chorus of ghosts. Inside, the fire snapped weakly in the hearth, its light spilling across the worn floorboards. The old cabin was quiet. Too quiet. Jake Lawson sat by the window, a rifle laid across his lap, his gray eyes scanning the tree line beyond the frosted glass. His face, carved by years of war and loss, was hard in the glow of the fire, every line a memory of a place he'd rather forget. Emily Carter sat at the table, hunched over the spread of papers Jake had gathered, shipping manifests, port schedules, photos of men she didn't recognize. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced one photo, a man in a dark suit, half turned from the camera, his face hidden. Silas, Jake had called him. She didn't know if that was his real name or another ghost in a file, but the fear he inspired was real. Rex lay nearby, his massive head resting on his paws. The bandages on his shoulder were fresh, replaced earlier that evening. He was awake but still. Only his ears moved, flicking at every sound outside. The wind, the shifting branches, the faint moan of ice on the roof. Even hurt. He was a sentinel. Jake stood and moved to the door. He checked the locks, the windows, the rifle again. The man couldn't rest. Combat had carved paranoia into his instincts. Emily watched him, wondering how long he'd been living like this, between silence and danger, trusting no one. You think they'll come here? She asked softly. He didn't look back. They already know where we are. The words hung in the air. Emily froze. How? Jake didn't answer. He stepped outside, boots crunching into snow, vanishing briefly into the white curtain. She followed him to the threshold, watching as he circled the cabin. His movements were deliberate, scanning, measuring. When he returned, his face was grim. Tracks, he said. 2 sets. They stopped 50 yards out. Whoever it was, they're patient. Before she could reply, Rex's low growl cut through the air. The dog rose, fur bristling, his gaze fixed on the window. Emily moved instinctively, crouching beside him. Jake's hand found the rifle's grip. Down, he whispered. The next second, the world erupted. The front door splintered inward under a heavy ram, shards of wood flying. Figures dressed in black tactical gear flooded in, 3 of them, moving with silent precision, faces hidden behind visors, no insignias, no voices, just motion and menace. The first man raised a suppressed weapon. Jake fired before he could aim. The bullet hit center mass, sending the intruder backward into the doorway. The second man dove behind the couch, spraying bullets into the walls. The third moved for the stairs, fast, too fast. Emily ducked behind the table, gripping her sidearm with shaking hands. Her police training surged up through the terror. Left flank! She shouted, voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Jake pivoted smoothly, the calm of a soldier who danced with death too many times. He fired again, glass shattering around them. The man on the stairs returned fire, clipping the lamp and plunging half the room into darkness. Rex lunged. The wounded dog tore across the room with a roar that drowned out the storm. He slammed into the attacker near the stairs, dragging him down with sheer mass. The man fought back, cursing, striking with the butt of his rifle, but Rex didn't let go. Emily rose, fired once, clean, the sound sharp and final. The man went still. For a moment, there was silence. Then the crackle of fire, the soft thump of spent shells on the wood floor. Jake lowered his rifle. His breathing was controlled, but sweat shone on his temple. Emily's hands were trembling again. 3 men, Jake said. Professional. No insignias. That means someone paid for silence. Emily knelt beside Rex. The dog's chest was heaving, but he was alive. She pressed her forehead against his, whispering, "You're okay, boy. You did good. You always do." Jake crouched by the body of one of the attackers, unfastening his glove. "They move like private contractors. Could be ex-military." He flipped the man's vest, revealing nothing but plain armor. No ID, no markings. He frowned. "But they tracked us somehow." Emily looked up sharply. "Tracked us?" Jake's gaze drifted to Rex. "He was with you at the clinic." Her breath caught. "You think?" He didn't answer. He reached for his field scanner, a small, matte gray device that emitted a faint blue light. Moving carefully, he passed it over Rex's body. The dog stood still, sensing the tension. The scanner remained silent until it neared the collar, the thick, black tactical one Emily had insisted he wear. A sharp beep cut the silence. Jake's jaw tightened. He unclipped the collar and turned it over. Nestled inside a hidden seam was a wafer-thin tracking chip, blinking faintly red. Emily felt the color drain from her face. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Rourke. He touched the collar at the clinic." Jake crushed the chip under his boot, the sound small but final. "That's how they found us." Emily slumped into the nearest chair, her hands covering her face. "He's been feeding them everything, every move, every conversation. I led them right here." Jake's tone softened, though the anger in his eyes was fierce. "This isn't on you. This was planned long before you knew it existed." Outside, the storm howled louder, as if echoing his words. The windows shook. In the firelight, the bodies of the attackers looked small, insignificant compared to the vastness of what hunted them. Jake reloaded his rifle, his movement steady. Emily stared at him, fear mixing with something else. Resolve. "What now?" she asked. Jake met her gaze. "Now we stop hiding. They wanted you silenced, Emily." He glanced toward the window, where snow drifted like falling ash. "But now we make them talk." The flames flickered, casting long shadows against the cabin walls. Outside, beyond the storm, the darkness seemed to move. Somewhere out there, Rourke was waiting, and behind him, the faceless ghost called Silas. For the first time, Emily didn't feel like prey anymore. The blizzard had swallowed Anchorage whole. The harbor, usually alive with the sound of ship horns and gulls, lay buried beneath an unending wall of white. Snow fell sideways, slicing through the air like shards of glass, and the cold burned the skin with every breath. Amid that frozen chaos, a black pickup truck crept through the docks, its headlights dimmed. Inside sat Jake Lawson, his face illuminated by the faint glow of a GPS tracker on his dashboard. His jaw was set, eyes hard and focused. Each wrinkle on his face was a scar of survival, carved from years of war and betrayal. Beside him, Emily Carter sat in silence, her hands gripping the edge of the seat. She wore a tactical jacket borrowed from Jake, her hair tied back, her blue eyes fierce despite the exhaustion shadowing them. Her badge lay forgotten in her pocket. She wasn't a cop tonight, just a survivor trying to end a nightmare. In the back seat, Rex lay curled on a blanket, his breathing heavy but determined. His fur had grown coarse around the wounds, patches of shaved skin revealing the pale scars beneath. Though he was limping and tired, his eyes, those deep, golden eyes, still burned with that same unbreakable loyalty that had saved Emily more times than she could count. He was 6 years old enough to know pain, yet too loyal to surrender. Jake's voice broke the silence. "The signal came from Dock 47, he said, glancing at the flickering dot on the map. "It's a warehouse, probably the last stop before they move the shipment out to sea." Emily's voice was steady, colder than the wind. "And Silas?" Jake exhaled through his nose. "If Rourke's been cleaning up his mess, Silas will be there. He doesn't delegate final moves. Not the type." They parked 2 blocks away, the truck hidden beneath an abandoned shipping crane. The blizzard provided cover and danger. Visibility was barely 10 feet. Jake handed Emily a small earpiece and checked his sidearm. "We move together. No heroics," he said. Emily gave a faint smile. "That's your line, Lawson." A moment of silence passed, the kind that meant more than words. Then they stepped out into the storm. The warehouse loomed ahead, a steel giant wrapped in snow and darkness. Its floodlights flickered, revealing shadows moving behind frosted windows. Jake motioned for Emily to take the left flank. He moved right, blending into the white like a ghost from his SEAL days. Emily crouched behind a stack of crates, her breath clouding the air, her heart pounding. She could hear muffled voices inside, men shouting over the roar of generators. Then, through a gap in the door, she saw them. Cages, rows of them. Inside were men, women, even children, huddled, terrified, faces pale from the cold. The sight made her stomach twist. She pressed her radio. "Jake, they're here. He's moving people, dozens of them." Jake's reply came low and steady. "Copy. I'm going in." He slipped through a side entrance, silent as a shadow. Inside, the air reeked of oil and metal. Crates were stacked high, each marked with false manifests. Near the center stood Silas, tall and sharply dressed despite the chaos, a man of precise menace. He was in his late 40s, clean-shaven with silver-streaked hair, and wore a tailored black coat that looked out of place in a warehouse of crime. His pale gray eyes were detached, like a man watching a business transaction, not human lives. "Move the containers," he ordered, his voice calm, cultured, and merciless. Near him stood Mason Rourke, his once polished appearance replaced by desperation. His trench coat was soaked, his hands trembling slightly as he held his weapon. The confidence was gone, replaced by the hollow gaze of a man cornered by his own lies. "Rourke," Silas said coldly, "you assured me the officer was dealt with." Rourke swallowed hard. "She was supposed to be. I sent the team myself." "Then perhaps you sent the wrong team." The words were barely out when a shot cracked through the air. Jake, perched on the catwalk above, had fired. The bullet struck the light overhead, plunging the warehouse into partial darkness. "Go!" he shouted into his radio. The chaos erupted instantly. Emily kicked open the side door, her weapon drawn. "Anchorage police, drop your weapons!" she shouted out of instinct, even though the badge meant nothing now. Gunfire answered her. She ducked behind a crate as bullets tore through the air, sparks raining down. Jake dropped from the catwalk, landing hard behind a steel beam. His movements were precise. 2 shots, 2 men down. The third charged him with a knife, and Jake met him halfway, disarming him with a brutal twist that left the man on the floor. Silas moved toward the rear exit, shouting orders in a language Emily didn't understand. Outside, through the haze of the storm, Emily caught sight of Rourke. He was limping toward her, his gun raised, his face twisted with fury. "You ruined everything!" he screamed. "You think you can expose me? You're nothing!" She aimed her weapon, but her hand shook. This was the man who'd trained her, the one she once respected. He stepped closer, smirking. "You don't have the guts." The click of a safety echoed between them. But before he could fire, a blur of tan fur launched through the snow. Rex, driven by pure instinct, slammed into Rourke, teeth clamping down on his arm. The shot went wild, echoing into the storm. Rourke fell backward, struggling, blood spraying across the snow. Emily fired once, clean, final. He went still. Rex staggered back, whining softly, his strength fading. Emily dropped to her knees, pulling him close. "You did it, boy," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You're home now." Inside the warehouse, FBI sirens wailed in the distance, flashing red and blue lights cutting through the storm. Jake emerged from the sea of smoke, dragging Silas in handcuffs. His face was streaked with soot and blood, but his eyes were steady. "He's done," Jake said simply. When the agents stormed in, led by Agent Lena Thorne, a tall, sharp-featured woman in her late 30s with short black hair and a trench coat dusted in snow, they found the survivors huddled in blankets, the criminals subdued, and a dog lying quietly beside the woman who refused to leave his side. Months later, the snow melted. The harbor thawed into silver water beneath a pale spring sun. A small wooden cabin stood near the edge of a forest outside Anchorage, where Emily and Jake had rebuilt something resembling peace. The cabin had a fenced yard, a handmade sign reading Haven Rescue Center. Jake repaired the kennels while Emily tended to an injured husky, her laughter soft, fragile, but real. Rex lay on the porch, his fur full and healthy again, one ear bent permanently from the fight. He watched them with half-closed eyes, the sun warming his scars. The world was quiet now, and for the first time in years, it stayed that way. Sometimes, miracles don't come with thunder or light. Sometimes, they walk quietly beside us, on 4 tired paws, through cold storms, through fear and loss. In the darkest night, when every sound feels like the end, a small act of loyalty, a heartbeat that refuses to stop, becomes proof that God still moves among us. Jake, Emily, and Rex survived not because they were the strongest, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. That faith, that courage to take one more step, is the very whisper of God's mercy. Perhaps that's what miracles truly are, not grand displays of power, but the gentle ways heaven reminds us we are not alone. And maybe, just maybe, each of us carries that same spark. When we choose kindness over anger, courage over fear, love over silence. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who might need a reminder that miracles still exist. Comment your thoughts below. Tell us where you're watching from, or share your own story of faith and courage. And if you believe that even in the coldest storm, God still guides our steps, subscribe to the channel so we can keep telling stories that warm hearts and remind us of His light. May God bless you, your loved ones, and every loyal heart, human or animal, that walks beside you through life's storms. Miracles are not rare. We simply forget to look.